Good morning everyone, welcome to my channel. I just wanted to go through a activity we did last year connected to Anne Brooke. She is a textile artist in the UK, amazing, very talented, and she walked us through a project last year where every week she gave us a challenge on a Friday afternoon, which was to create a tag that had a theme about it. So every Friday her video would come out and away we go for the week, create our tag. So what I wanted to do in this video, it will be a series of videos, but the first one is just showing you the tags that I did and the details of where to go if you'd like to do the challenge, because there's just so many videos out there, not only from Anne, but all sorts of amazing artists that have also joined in. So my plan is, now that we've completed the project, I want to make a journal of stitchery fabrics to hold all of these tags. So the first thing I want to do, like I just said, is show you the tags, and then the next few videos will be making the actual book, because at the moment I've got them in two little boxes. Well, they're actually little drawers. So I just wanted to have them in a book that I can flick through and have a little look, because the more I rummage through this little box of tags, I'm going to start damaging them. So I just want to make sure they're nice and safe. So I've popped here Anne's details. That's her full name, and she's in the UK. And if you go into Facebook and Instagram and do hashtag Anne Brooks Textile, or hashtag I think that should say 52 tags and handmade. So there should be a 52 in the center there. Just insert that there. But look, if you just start typing in hashtag 52 tags, there's heaps that'll pop up. So you'll eventually find your way to Anne herself, where you'll find her account and everything that she did with us. So let's begin. I'll just move that over a little bit so that you can see these tags. So what I did is I used a pre-made tag that I picked up here in Australia at Officeworks. They're just like a label that you would attach to a bag of fruit or something like that. They're, I think I got a couple hundred for not a lot of money. So they're quite soft. So what I did first of all was I got some scrapbook paper, some printed out scrapbook paper, and I glued with glue stick. I just used a craft glue stick. I put glue all over the back of the tag, and then I pushed it down onto the paper. And once I got a couple onto the paper, for example, like so, I then turned it over, and using a brayer, I just pushed the paper onto that glue and the tag underneath. So that made sure I had that nice flat surface and everything contacted beautifully, and there was no air bubbles. So that's the first thing I did. So and I used random pieces, and I didn't think about it. I just literally went through, and well, they're all the same, so that's not so random. So there's some more. I had some music paper. Some of these prints were from a project that I was doing, and they are from Roxy Creations, Rachel's Etsy store. So, and they're like vintage wallpapers and some prints that she's created. So it's quite random what I did. Some I just used some old book page and stenciled on a bit of an image. That's another one from, I think that's from Porch Prints, is an Etsy store that I often buy digital prints from for scrapbooking. So I thought from there I just popped them all in a little drawer, and when it came to the week, I just grabbed a tag. They were already pre-done, finished the back. So then the prompts came. There's no particular order, and what I'll do is I'll grab each one and I'll tell you the week and what the prompt was. So this one was seed stitch, and it's number 16. On the back of each tag, I put the date that I actually made it, and if I was so enthused, sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't, I did a little extra bit of embroidery on the back of each one. And then using some letter stamps, I've got Nico on my finger, or Texter. I sort of spelt out the words and the week and just used some ink to print that on a little bit of calico. So some ladies wrote something about the week, like a little diarised note about what they did for the week, which was a lovely idea. Anne stitched these on to her piece onto her tag. I didn't, I just used my glue stick. So it's just another way of attaching them. And then I put in reinforced the hole with a grommet there using my crocodile. So that sort of allowed me to have it on a ring or on a piece of cord, but I've since decided that they're going to go into a book. So as I said, this one is seed stitch. So we'll have had a good look at that one. I'll just go through and pull them out so you can have a little look. This one was couching. We had to roll fabric and then stitch it down with some couching stitch, which is basically your thread goes down and over you go to secure it. And in this I added some beads and some bits and pieces, and then a little bit of tatting at the top that I had, a little bit of doily and a little rose and a little bow at the bottom. Okay, so that's that one. I'll have to move along because this is going to take forever, being there's 52. This is weaving, strips of fabric, over, under, and then I embellished it with some additional stitches. So that's that one. This one here was week 39, a creature. So I made a moth. So the body is just some doily that are scrunched up and then a heap of little stitches sort of to hold it together. Then I dropped some stitches across his back, added it to some linen, and then embellished his wings a little bit of lace, couple buttons. Okay, so that's the creature. This next one is slow stitch. So it was really going back to just literally stitches. So that was actually more of a challenge than some of these others for me, because I tend to be so over the top with my embroidery, for want of a better word. But this was just slow down and just stitch. So I sort of used denims this time, and I sort of made myself think, okay, I've got a hole in my pants and I need to do a patch, and I'm going to pretend that I'm back in the 1800s when it is just basic stitches. And yeah, pretty happy with the way it worked out. And of course I had to add something because I just can't help myself. This next one is called Yummy. It's one of my favorites. It's layers of textures to create something yummy. So just some old lace, a linen covered bead, some pearls, just layers, and there's some little seed beads in there as well. So that's that one. The next one is Oh Christmas Tree. So getting to the end, and it was December. So this challenge, that was actually weaving, and they made a Christmas tree weaving fabrics, weaving yarn into the shape of a Christmas tree, and it didn't really inspire me. And I'd had this little idea in my head to make Christmas tags for some friends, which never happened, you know, just another idea. And I decided at least to make one, and maybe next year I'll spot it and have a bit of time and do some tags for some friends for their gifts with a little bit of embroidery. So that was the Christmas tree one. This one here, wrap. Okay, so this was all about find an object and wrap some thread around it. So I chose a key and then pop that on a tag. So that's wrapped. This one is cross stitch. I had a really busy week this week and I didn't have a lot of time. So what I did was, I knew I had this old doily that had some cross stitch on it. So I embellished it with some extra stitching around the outer edge and then just popped it on there. So someone somewhere made this and now it's forever on a little tag. But I think it was about 10 of them in a pattern, lots of squares, and I've just removed one of them and added it to the tag. This was a challenge too, fireworks. It was a bit of a challenge to conjure up a design of fireworks, but it worked. I think it did. Fireworks. Little birdie, just a little embroidery of a little bird. This is another favorite. This one's called Layers. This was week 3. Just beautiful. If I can get up there. So what we did is we folded heaps of little elements, all the same width and height, in half, and stitched one of them down, and then the next. There's a little piece of lace next, then a piece of calico, another piece of lace, another piece of lace, and I even added in some old book page, and each one was just some stitches through the center to attach it to the background fabric, and that created layers like a fringe. And then I just add a little bit of tatting at the bottom to finish it. And because I felt like I was snipping and snipping little bits of fabric, I had a little embellishment of a pair of scissors, popped a doily at the back to sort of create the top of the element, and popped a few beads in there. Really pretty, really unusual. So I've never done that before, and that was, yeah, a lot of fun. Took forever, but a lot of fun. So layers. This one is called Sheath Stitch. Okay, so haven't done this stitch before, and it came up beautifully. It is 3 stitches on top of each other with a little gap, and then you come back through the middle and secure them together to create this little star. So 3 stitches on top of each other, and as you can see, you then pull them together with a stitch in the middle. So I just layered some laces together to create the base for that one. So that's that. Then we have fringe. This was all about creating a textured fringe on the bottom of a tag. Okay, so I had some fabric that was music, and then layered it up to create the little fringe and lace. Okay. Now this one is called Layers as well. And I did a little bit of embellishing on the back of that one. And this was layers of fabric and lace, and then I had a stamped pussycat on a piece of calico. So he became my feature piece. I put in a metal tag that says together, and that sort of gave me a baseline, and then the flowers came out from there in layers. And those flowers are pretty much made up of bits of lace. That's like a connected trim. Then I popped some little beads in there that continued on to the top, and then some pistol stitch and a few little lazy daisies, and tried to pick up the greens that were in behind on this stripy fabric. Okay, so that one's layers. This little guy, bullion stitch. So we had to do the bullion stitch over the edge of something. So I chose denim because it's nice and sturdy, and it allowed me to get the stitch to sit nicely over the edge. And then I thought, well, I'm going to have a play with roses made from bullion stitch. They didn't quite work out as roses, but I managed to get a flower and some leaves made of bullion, and then just used a little bit of lace to finish it off, like there's a bouquet of flowers coming out from there. If you want to see more of these in more detail, go to my Instagram page for Tobelovedtreasures, and you'll see photos each week back through my file of the different tags. So this one is Pekingese stitch. Okay, the flower is a circle of stitches, just in a like running stitch, and then you thread your needle underneath each stitch to create a loop. I don't know if you can see it real good there, but if you go into YouTube and just type in Pekingese stitch, it'll bring up all sorts. Then I just add a little bit of floral fabric. I did a leaf, I couched the stem, some pistol stitch, and instead of a knot at the end of them, I put a little bead, and then I added just the word memories. Okay, so that's Pekingese stitch, which is the flower around the button. Okay, so now we have memories. This one I didn't do much at all. This piece was a piece of crocheting that I had from my grandmother's estate, and I just loved it. It was attached to a piece of linen, so I cut the linen off. It was really stained, so it was definitely a doily that she loved and used on her Duchess. So I thought, I'm just going to take the corner. She crocheted this piece, so I just thought, what a beautiful place to pop a little piece of her work. So that was my week memories. Okay, what's this little guy? Circles. Okay, this one was all about cutting circles, making circles, stitching circles. So that's what I come up with for that week. So the circle at the top there, I went around with running stitch, then on the outside of it as well, so it looks like it's radiating. I did a circle of satin stitch. It's barely a circle, mind you. Look at it. It looks more like an oblong. Then I had a motif out of a doily, and I did some bullion stitches around just to highlight the colour into that and sort of tie it all together. So that's circles. Okay, bunch of flowers. Another one of my favourites. I'll pop it down there first and then bring it up. This is using ribbons and beads. Just lazy daisy stitch to create the flowers, and then I had some it's suede, a little piece of suede I found at an op shop, which is just a beautiful green. I use it a lot, and I just cut out some little leaves, and to hold them into position I just did some running stitch through them. And then to create a baseline to my piece was the lace, and then some little X's, little cross stitches to sort of start the image coming up from there. I sort of like to create a ground, a baseline, a horizon on all my work. It sort of just gives me a point to go from. Okay, so that's the little piece. Really happy with that, the way that one will come up. This next one is bullion stitch. So once again, using the stitches to create a piece. Let me just come up to that camera. At the bottom, lots of different loops and French knots and loose knots, and then seed stitches, and then the bullions, and then a button. I just tried to not think too much about it and just let the stitches cluster together to create the piece. And these, to get that curve in the bullion stitch, you just add more and more loops, and the more loops you add, it suddenly just won't sit flat like the blue ones down here. It then starts kicking around and becoming like a tendril. But the trick to it is to have a needle that doesn't have a big eye. The eye of the needle is just about the width of the actual needle, so that you can slide your threads off really easily. So that'd be my hot tip there. This little one is spider wheel. I only used it ever so slightly at the top here, and that was create a 5-spoked flower stitch, basically just straight into the center and then out in 5 different directions, and then you weave another thread around the spokes up and over and up and over, and to create a spider's web. And every one of them I did, I wasn't a real lover of. They were pulling my fabric, so whether my tension of my hand was too much, I think my fabric was pretty lightweight too, that didn't help. So they ended up being just small little pieces. And because I really wanted to use this piece where I ordered some fabric from someone, I think it was a lady in France, and she had stamped onto this the green leaf and a bit of a purpley flower, or if she didn't stamp it, she may have laid down some floral from the garden, and then the inks from the flower went into the fabric. I'm just not 100% sure how she did it. It sort of looks like paint to me. I don't think it was a natural piece. So there was a bit of a wash of purples here, so I just embellished it with beads and added some yellow stamens. This is a perfect example of the piece looked quite flat. If I cover the yellow, I think it looks quite flat, and as soon as you add yellow, it sort of just helps lift the piece up. And then the stem, I just put heaps of beads along it, different coloured purples and French knots. That was a lot of fun. Enjoyed that piece. I really like doing a florally sort of ensemble. This one was 2 tags. So I had my original tag at the back, then we had to make one to sit that was smaller on top. So I just cut some cardboard out, created the little tag, and then I had this little piece of embroidery from a doily that was kicking around. I did add a little bit of my own embroidery here on the side, some pistol stitch with some bullion knots on top. Added a little edge that come off of a doily to create that scalloped detail, and then that's vintage hanky with a little lace edge. You'll see that appear on another video. I think it's video 2, where I talk about using some vintage handkerchiefs that have those beautiful little decorative lacy edges. So that's a few elements that others made, and then I just added my little bit of embroidery, and there's a little bit of cheesecloth behind to make a little tag on top of the big tag. So that's that one. Okay, this one was called Buttons. So I did a bouquet of buttons. I used some twine, stitched it down. Then I had this piece of braid. Now this piece of braid, I was talking to my mum, this would be close to 100 odd years old, because it came from a hat that a great aunt had. And back in the day, they were always making their own hats to wear to church or to town. And this braid, if I really tug at it, it just starts sort of unraveling and breaking down. So it's quite stiff and rigid, like it's delicate. Crusty is not the right word, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Brittle is the better word. So I've had this little piece kicking around for so long, and I thought that'll make a perfect little bow. It's got a real satiny, pearlized finished. I added some little flower clusters. That was a pre-made piece. And then in amongst it, some of the little buttons to make a bouquet. And then the back piece of fabric I actually got from a fabric pack from Rachel from Roxy Creations, and it's a real textured hemp. It's just beautiful. I've got a couple little pieces of it, and I'm very treasured, and occasionally I snip a little bit off and use it. Okay, this one was called Gold. Now this was a challenge. I had this gold thread. I've had it for a little while, and it's probably got about 6 or 7 threads in the main thread that you can pull it apart and use elements of. I decided to use the whole thing. For a start, it was like sliding metal through the top of my needle, so it sort of made my teeth rattle a little bit. I'm not a lover of metal on metal. So I managed to get it through the needle and then started embroidery with it, and I found that in no time it was starting to fray apart and was getting crazy. So the trick to it was to actually cut off small pieces. So instead of doing the usual from your wrist to your elbow in length of thread that you might cut to embroider, because if you go any longer, the more you pull it through your fabrics, the more the threads start to break down. Any thread that's they get furry and fluffy. So the secret to it is not to have too big of a piece of thread. So this particular thread, I had to go really small. Like, I'm thinking from memory, it was about 7 inches, where normally I do about 10 inches of thread. So, excuse me, that then allowed me to get a few stitches done, and then as it started to break down and unravel and cause me grief, I was done. A brand new piece was then used. So I just did a little design that was simple and just basic stitching to showcase the thread more than anything. Now, reverse applique. This was fun, but I sort of jiggered it up a little bit. I didn't listen to the last few minutes of the video. And the thing was, it was layers of fabric. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Create a design and then cut away some of the layers to reveal the layer underneath. And then we were supposed to keep the cutaway bits and applique them onto the next tag the next week. Well, if I had heard that small detail, I would have made bigger leaves, maybe a slightly different design, and then I would have had nice pieces that were left to applique the next tag. So I didn't. I made them slithery, and by the time I hacked them out, they were falling to bits. So it didn't go real well, but still happy with how the piece came together. And I ended up cutting away the side there so I could see the different layers of the greens that I used. And in reflection, I probably would have had more of a color difference between the last two. They're very similar. They're like an olive and then a dark. That one's got a little print. That one there is like a marbly olive. So they're so similar that you can't really see that there is much difference there. That'd be my only thing that I'd change there. So somewhere in here we'll come across another tag that is meant to be the bits. This one, I believe this was yo-yo or Suffolk puff. So we had to create a Suffolk puff or use an old one and create something out of it. So I decided to do a big, mushy, luscious flower. So that's a little piece of trim that those little pearly bits are all connected together. So I just added that as a little square, trimmed it with a bow. Then we get to the puff itself, and it's just layers of crocheting, some fibre, wool. This is the yarn that they use to make scarves, that feather yarn. Eyelash yarn is another name. So I just picked them up during winter, some different colours, and I use them for so much, not only embroidery, but I'd thread that through the tag here and make a little tassel at the top. I put it on the side of my journals. I just love that. It's soft. It's really, really yummy. Here's some just handy here on my desk. So it's eyelash yarn. So as soon as winter comes and all of the wools come out, go for a little walk down the aisle. And there's all sorts of fantastic yarns out there now that can be used as textures in your needlework. Okay, this little one here was tatting. Yes, tatting. As I said in a previous video, I tried to learn tatting via a book many years ago. Didn't work. Then Anne introduced us to tatting, a nice simple way of doing it on a needle, similar to crocheting. And I'm a crocheter, so you'd think I could have pulled this off, but it was just too fine. It was slipping and it was making me stressed. So I was like, what am I going to do? And then I thought, well, my dear grandmother, she was a tatter. She did all this. So I went back through my little box and I found some tatting from a doily that she had started and not actually finished. She hadn't got around the whole edge of the doily. And the doily itself had lots of yellow spots and that on it. So I cut that off so you can still see the doily where she attached. And then to embellish it, I just started doing some lazy daisy stitches, added some beads. Hope you can see all this and I'm not making you seasick by swinging around it. Look at that tatting. They're all individual stitches. My goodness me. That's just crazy. Oh, hats off to the girls and boys out there that can do tatting. Not me. Okay, we're on to the second box now. This one here was called Heart. Oh, I really went to town on the back. See, the first month, the 8th of the 1st. See, a good example of enthusiasm at the beginning of the project. It waned as the year went on. So that's just a little heart that I've embellished with some stitches and added a little bow and some little textiles and a little bit of tatting on the edge. So that one is a heart. Okay, this one is, oh, there's two here, treasure. So we had to create a pocket and add into the pocket a treasure. Okay, so what I did here, I had this beautiful cross, so I used that as part of my treasure. And this piece of lace here, Not sure if I attached it. Oh, I didn't. Lovely. That is from a snippet of fabric that I've got stashed. My mum's wedding dress had I want to use the word cardigan, but it's not. It's an overcoat. So she had her dress and then a lace overcoat that went to the hemline of the dress, to the floor, long sleeves, and the whole piece was made out of this lace. So I've got probably about 40 centimeters of this lace in a little box with some photos. So I thought, for a treasure, what a perfect little way of incorporating some of this lace into my little pocket. And then I used the denim pocket that was on an old pair of jeans, so that sort of gave me the top edge nicely stitched by a machine somewhere in the world. And then because they use like a creamy caramel stitch, I then embellished with a similar stitch around the outside to make it really look like the pocket. Then made a little flower and some little pearls. Now these pearls were from my wedding dress that I had left over from when Grandma made my dress. So Grandma would have made my mum's wedding dress with this lace overcoat, and then some little pearls from my dress. And this is a laundry label that I found online. It took me probably 12 months to find it, that were my initials. So every so often you'll see those appear on my work. I'm trying to use them as a bit of a signature piece, especially in the bigger pieces that I do. So that's treasure in a pocket. Now this one is Lazy Daisy. Now I've been doing Lazy Daisy since I was 10. It's the most common stitch we all learn when we're learning to embroider. So I just did not want to do the classic daisy. I feel like I'm daisied out. So using that same stitch, I created this piece of foliage using the classic daisy stitch, just long and elongated, some French knots, and then behind is just a pretty little floral fabric. You can see the original at the top edge here, and then I went over the white floral or the cream with a dark strawy color and just covered it up with lots of little stitches. So it sort of created the double. So you see the white at the top, that's what it originally looked like, and then I embellished it with that stitch and then started the floral, the green, and it led down to a little bunny. And I just did a few little extra stitches in there, mainly because he frayed. When I cut him out of the piece of fabric, he just started to fray really quickly. So I did lots of little stitches in there just to help anchor that fabric so that it wasn't so soft and fell apart on me. So that, would you believe, is Lazy Daisy. At least it didn't look like the classic Lazy Daisy flowers that we've all been doing. Okay, what else have we got here? How are we going for time? Yep, we're fine. This was the week one, and actually really love it. It was just white was the brief. So I just started layering the laces and then put a little embellishment, a cluster of bits and bobs on the bottom, added the little dragonfly jewel. I just picked him up at a cheap shop. So the more you look, the more you can see with this piece, but because it's all white, it sort of just all blends together beautifully. And there's a little bit of lace there, a snippet. This little sprig at the end here has come off something. Then the little bow with the little flower in the center. Okay. Okay, another bunny. Same fabric. This time I blanket stitched around. I'm going to guess that this is blanket stitch. Yes, it is. Week 12. Blanket stitch. So I created the floral piece. Actually, no, I do tell a lie. This bunny is surrounded by random flowers on this piece of fabric. So that there is one of the flowers. It's like a thistle. So I've stitched the whole thing. Add a little metallic thread to the top of the thistle. You can see it sparkling there. Then use some blanket stitch to create some tendrils of more foliage, a little sprig there, and kept popping a little bit of the metallic thread. This is the sister thread to the gold one you saw earlier. I think I've got in 3 colors 4 silver, gold, the dusty pink, and a blue. And I haven't had a play with the blue yet. So that's blanket stitch. So a great example of classic blanket stitch, which we all know we do around a rectangle or a circle applique, that you can use it for building up floral detail. Now, this one was a bit of a challenge. It's a cup of tea. Anne is English and drinks a lot of tea, I think. So therefore the theme this week was a cup of tea, or you could do a cup of coffee. But I tried to create a tablecloth. There's my baseline, and then the fabric I chose had some little flowers on it, and I just embellished them with a few stitches. The tea or coffee inside, I just did a heap of little brown stitches and a bit of steam coming off, and then I found a circular piece of lace, and that was the handle. It's not exactly in proportion, and it sort of doesn't look like a cup of tea, but it works. It's abstract. That's what you say when it doesn't quite look like what you thought it might look like. This one here is rings. This was a challenge. This was find some metal rings and wrap with a slip knot around the ring with embroidery thread to cover it. So there's a little purple one in there, and then I used some bullion stitches to attach it down. Then the next one is, let's bring this back this way, a pink and then a bigger one. And then in the center, I put some little seed stitches. The one at the top, I did a little embellishment at the base with a little piece of lace and some stitches to make it look like a bit of a wreath, and then did some different colored purple to attach the ring down, and then a few more embellishments at the top, sort of to create this rectangular design, this L. There's my baseline, and it's shooting up the side. So from a design element, I've got a line here and a line here, and I just kept adding into that zone and staying away from everywhere else, just so that it sort of created a bit of a cluster. And then as a feature, I've just got a pair of scissors there, a charm that I had, and attached that as an additional element. Okay, this one is fly stitch, and I even did some on the back. I bet this is early, yeah, January, once again, enthusiastic. So there's even some fly stitch on the back. Can bring that up, and then lots of stitches and a bit of an embellishment at the bottom. There's some of that eyelash yarn again. It's just a great way of adding a little bit of texture, and then created a bit of a sun treatment at the top. Used a variegated thread so that it was just one thread, and the thread changed colors, which gave it all sorts of different elements to my piece without having to think too hard. There's the sequins, just a couple little sequins to add some detail. Okay, another one of my favorites actually. This one is buttons again. Look, we're still decorating the back. February. Had the enthusiasm into the first week of February. Okay, and this is the front. So I found on eBay some of these really old linen buttons, like they're actually quite dirty. They've been rattling around in a drawer somewhere, in a dusty old drawer, on the paper that they would have been purchased and attached to when the ladies would have bought them. So I just wanted a little home for it, so stitched that on, and then added some other little elements around the piece. Did some pistol stitch to create some flowers, just to sort of add a little bit of detail to the piece, and then added the buttons. So a really good way of storing some of your vintage pieces is create a little embroidery and then add whatever the element is to it, so that if this was bigger, you could pop that then in a little frame, and it's just a nice safe space for your buttons. Okay, the next one is brooch. This one I didn't really do. A lot of people made a brooch and then put a brooch pin at the back of the piece and then pinned it to their tag. I didn't do that. I just created a decorative embroidery using a piece of fabric that is in underneath all that, floral. Embellished it with some stitches. I might get my little pointer here. So you can see there's the original fabric in behind, and then I just added some pale little blue stitches and some white. Down here is another flower, and then I just added the pale, left a bit of the dark blue showing with some white stitches, and then added a little couple embellishments of some roses and some bits of lace and another button, laundry tag, and some beads. And this fabric here, I went through my husband's cupboard and there's a shirt there that was just getting really thin, like one more wash it would have literally exploded in the washing machine, I think. And it was just such a beautiful check that I just tore the best bit I could find out of it. I think it was the 2 panels that come down either side of the buttons at the front, and a sleeve or 2, and just kept bits of it. And that'll pop up in needlework because I just love those colours. Okay, oh gosh, this one was frustrating. Beading. I thought beading was easy. These tassels you see hanging off of, you can buy them like by the meter, and you have beads hanging off the bottoms of fringing. And I thought, oh well, one day I'll have a go at that, and that looks easy. This took hours and hours to do. I don't think I'll ever do it again, but it was fun, I say with gritted teeth. But boy, I have a new appreciation for the folks that sit there and create these tendril drops of beads to be stitched into a piece of fabric that then we come along and take a meter of it and then add it to a lamppost or a fringe, a dress, a doll, whatever. Anne made us make it, and wow, that's all I'll say. There are so many beads. I'm going to be truthful here. There are so many of these beads under my couch that whenever we move and I lift that couch up, I'm going to have enough to probably make this again. They were flying everywhere. I think that was part of my frustration. But anyway, we'll move on. This one was about hexagons. Yes, hexagons. We had to create a hexagon out of paper and then cover it with the fabric and then stitch it down. So I decided to do a bee theme. So in amongst this is a tiny little bee, just embroidered on a piece of felt. I cut the black felt out, and then did some yellow stitching, added some petals, and then built his little hexagons around him with some embellishments of some little flowers, and sort of embellished the hexagons as well with some additional stitches. So that's hexagon. Okay, this one is word. So I chose the word love. And this is actually a doily that was not embroidered. I've used this in a few different projects. The red book has it, as well as it appears with the dragonfly as a big piece on a block in 2 other videos. So that's just a little bit of that same doily where I've just embellished the flower with beads, satin stitched the tendrils, added a few pearls, and then along the bottom, that was a little piece of fabric that I've embellished, created a few additional little clusters with some embroidery, and that's the color swatch that would be on the edge of the fabric that shows the different colors that we used in this particular piece of fabric here. That's the selvage, and the word love was just embroidered on. I think I stamped it and then embroidered over the stamp. Okay, we're getting there. Pistol stitch. So I used a stamped piece of fabric. I think that came from a fabric pack I got from Rachel, actually. That's one of her stamps. It's a maidenhair fern. I just did a little bit of green through the center and then added some little details along the bottom. And once again, that's that fabric from one of Rachel's fabric packs. You don't need a lot of fabric, you just need little bits and pieces of things. So yeah, really good. This one's another one of my favorites. It's called threads. So whenever you embroider, you always have a heap of threads left. So Anne told us at the beginning of the project, keep those little offcuts in a jar, and then we're going to make something with them in the coming tags. And this one, I decided to actually make a little bird's nest. And then inside the bird's nest, I just stitched a couple little pearls for the eggs, and then added some feather. I had a feather here, so I peeled off all the fluffy stuff off the edge of it, and then added that in the center. So I was thinking like a bird. And because I didn't really feel like embroidering a bird, and to get him at the right size, it just would have been too bulky. And it was all about the threads in the nest. So I put in behind an image of a bird sitting on a twig, and then built up the threads, then added the feathers, then added the eggs, and in behind it was just a sort of a piece of lace and some other little textiles. So it's like little bird has gathered all those little scraps to create himself a nest, and he's just sitting off to the side in the background, keeping a watchful eye. I don't know, he should be sitting on his eggs, shouldn't he? She, he, depending on the bird. Okay, so I really loved how that one came to be. This little one was called Bits. So I usually start at the base and work my pieces up. So this time I started at the top with the bow and just kept layering bits, creating tendrils, and then as in the bits I just started adding shells. So you can see the shells in there, some sequins to create a little flower, some words off of some braids, some little end of the vintage doily bits. Like, it's literally all the snip bits that are left on your table from doing something was sort of how this all came to be. So just layers and layers of bits. Okay, this one is also hexagons, but these were different hexagons. Usually you fold the fabric around your piece of paper, and then that is down and hidden, and you get a nice clean hexagon. This one, she made us showcase those folded bits of fabric on the top. So then I created a couple, layered them, and started creating a bit of a flower treatment. This fabric in behind, I just sat and stitched the rows, adding different pinks, sort of following what the fabric designer did. Wherever it was dark or light, tried to just stay within that. And the leaves too, they sort of had two tones about them. Then the hexagon, then some more leaves, and there's a little cotton thread there. And that piece behind was one of those table runners where there was embellished bits of needlework on it from a big industrial sewing machine. So that sort of just gave a little bit of texture in behind. That's not my stitching, that's was already on this fabric. So that one was hexagons, but they're upside down hexagons. This one was to create a scene. So it was all about building a foreground, and then I sort of went back a little bit and stitched a fence with a broken bit of wire so you would walk through there, and then the mountains went off and the tree in the background, and then the sun and some wispy clouds. Whether it's in proportion, not really, but it was fun to sort of create a landscape. So that's the foreground leading to the fence, mountain ranges, then the tree starts. There's a few trees on the very back horizon, and then the sky, which was the clouds, wispy clouds, and then a sun. So a little bit of fun. And I tried something different using grey tones instead of typical greens. Cross stitch is the next one. Yep, cross stitch. 29th of the 1st, so still embellishing the back. That enthusiasm is still there. So I did a big cross out of some lace and then embellished with little crosses, and then added the little braid to the side of flowers. And I had this little piece of net that had some little flowers on it, if you can see that. So I've just popped that in there as well. It was those nice pinky tones. It's a pretty little piece. Weaving. This came up so well, and I would never have thought to do it on a scale of a tag. What Anne had us do, you can see it on the back, is we stitched through with one big thread and then went down again, down, back, down, back, down, back, which created a strata of threads to allow us to weave in and out of. So I used then some yarn that I had left from making a scarf or a blanket. I'm not sure what I used that. No, it was a blanket. So it was a bubbly looking textured sort of piece of yarn. So I wove that through first. Then I left a gap because I wanted to sort of see what I'd done to create it. Then I used some sari silk and wove that through. I think I did 3 runs and then just knotted it at the end. Then, staying within the colour range, I had some more yarns that were those denim-y sorts of colours. There's the wheat, there's the denim, and then in the middle was one that sort of just tied it all together, which was a variegated yarn. Then I added a couple little pieces of embroidery, and then this wheat coloured yarn I added at the bottom and made a cluster. As I went along, it was like a knot, a slip knot with all of these yarns. And then the little bit of variegated yarn here again. And actually, I think as I wove through this, there was that dangly bit, and I just left it. So that sort of helped build up this texture on the side. I was so impressed with this. I often admire huge wall hangings where they do this type of work. And they just look massive and huge and so much work in them. And this tag is like a snippet of it. So I was absolutely stoked. So I got to try something new. Would I ever make a wall hanging? Probably not. But it was fun doing it on a smaller scale. Very, very cool. Only a couple left. This one was a little house, I believe. No, flags. That's what it was. So I made bunting and made it a little house for the bunting to go to hang across, a little beach house. So just layered some fabrics together, did some random little stitches to hold it in place, little chimney, the roof line, the little porthole, and then created a little bunting to go across the little beach house. Okay, that's the 8th. I see enthusiasm is gone. That's the 8th month, the 14th of the 8th. Nothing, just stamped it, stuck it on, I was gone. Okay, this next one is a medal. Okay, I had this piece that she believed she could, so she did. And I thought, well, that felt like a medal, a buckle, a medallion. And then I added some little scissors on a clip. Not a lot of needlework in that. It's all more about laying the layers to create what would look like a medal that you would award someone and pin on their shirt. So I sort of tried to keep it in that sort of shape. There would have been a ribbon behind idea when I've just used some lace and then attached it. So nice and simple. Second last one. Layers of lace. So this is just literally layers of lace. So a little bit of tatting, a lace motif, pop of pink, pop of taut lace in behind the browns, and then I just put the word inspiration there. Just simple. Come up really well. So that's around May. So layers of lace, week 22. And the last one was Christmas. So I just did a little image that represents Christmas for me, and cross-stitched and embroidered and just added to my little tag, and that would have been the last one. Yep, 52 tags, Christmas. Okay, so that's all my tags. As you can see, a lot and a lot of work, but it was so much fun. I'm so pleased I did the challenge. Now I just have to work out what I'm going to do with all these beauties, and I'm thinking a book. So I'll leave the video at that, and the next video will be putting together something to hold all of my tags. Thank you everyone for joining me on this showcase of this particular project. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.